Hello and welcome to episode 16 of series 2 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from The Big Picture People. If this is the first time you've listened to the Engaging Internal Comms podcast, you're more than welcome. We have plenty of other episodes on our website, engagingic.com, and you can also find those on the podcast platform that you're listening to this podcast on now. So we're now back into our regular fortnightly interview shows. Over the last few weeks, I've been doing some shorter episodes between our interview shows where we've shared some resources with you, but we're back into our normal rhythm now, fortnightly shows with the interviews going out on each of those. Next week, or in 2 weeks' time, I should say, not next week, 2 weeks' time, we have an interview coming up with Matthew McLean, who is from the Podcast Host, and this is the first of a couple of podcast recordings that I'm going to be doing, or interviews that I'm going to be doing, where we're going to be looking at podcasting as a channel that you can use within your own organization, or audio anyway as a channel that you can use. I think we're all kind of very familiar with using video and other digital platforms, but podcasting and audio is sometimes something that gets overlooked. And if you're listening to this, I guess you're someone who likes listening to audio, you like consuming information via audio. So we're going to be looking at what some of the things that you can look to do within your organization to use audio more effectively. So that's going to be episode 17 of this series, which is coming out on the 25th of May. And then the following week, I've got Paula Leach from Vantage Points, who's going to be giving us some ideas about how we can lead employee engagement within our organizations. Paula's just released a very interesting book with some very interesting ideas on it. And I think for internal communicators and employee engagers, it's always useful to know how we can coach and encourage our leaders within our organizations to be more effective when it comes to engaging our employees. So that's the next couple of interviews that we've got coming up on episodes 17 and 18. As I said, if this is the first time you've listened to the show, there we have plenty of other episodes. As you can tell, this is series 2, episode 16, so as you can work that out for yourself. We've got 30 episodes in the previous series 1. And you, as I say, you can find those on your podcast platform or on our website, engagingic.com. If you find today's interview show useful, then please share it with someone else in your network, anyone else who you think might benefit from it. We're looking to grow our audience and looking to build our followership, and what that allows us to do then is to attract more and more great interviewees that we can bring to you to be able to listen to. If you've got any suggestions as well, if you've got any potential interviewees who you'd like to suggest, if you'd like to even nominate yourself, then get in touch with us via our contact form at engagingic.com. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see there's a form there that you can send in. You can send us your details and we'll get in touch with you. Failing that, if you just want to get in touch with us via email, you can drop us an email at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Anyway, let's move on to this episode's interview. At the back end of last year, I was interviewed for the Institute of Internal Communications magazine in an article where they were looking about ways to communicate with what were classed as offline employees. And by offline employees, what we're talking about are employees who do not typically have access to the very popular ways of communicating that we have within organizations now, whether that's email, whether that's Yammer, whether that's Microsoft Teams. They're typically people who either have no access to digital equipment, or they work in an environment where they can't use digital equipment, and therefore it prohibits them from being able to consume information through those channels. So I wanted to sort of explore that whole area of offline employees with someone who's working in an organization or has worked in organizations where that has been particularly an issue. And what we wanted to do, first of all, was explore what is our definition of offline employees. I've given you a few parameters there as part of the introduction. Then start to look at, well, what are some of the channels that we may use or need to use when it comes to communicating with those employees that are maybe something channels that we might see as old school, or maybe not necessarily particularly glamorous, but very effective for communicating with them. And then finally, I wanted to kind of look at what other supporting elements do we need to be thinking of in our organizations in order to make sure that we are not isolating or alienating our offline employees and keeping them as informed as our online employees when it comes to knowing what's going on within the organization and the role that they play in helping us deliver our objectives. And so that's what today's interview is all about. Okay, so my interviewee today is Owen Weldon. Owen is the Internal Communications Manager and Communications Business Partner for UK and Ireland at Merck Group. Prior to working for Merck, Owen has 10 years of in-house and agency experience where he has held internal communications roles for both Tesco and Vodafone. So hi, Owen, how are you?
Hi, Craig. How are you? I'm good. I'm
Very,
doing
yeah,
good. Thanks.
Yeah, very good, thank you. And I know where you are, but just for the listeners' benefit, where are you based at the moment, Owen?
I'm based in Cork, Ireland. So Merck would have a pretty big operation at the Cork site. Big membrane manufacturing operation. So I'm based loosely out of there, but like many people, I've been based at home for the majority of the last 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and absolutely in Cork, a lovely part of the world in Ireland there. So very, 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 very just. I know it gets its fair share of weather coming in from the Atlantic, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
wonderful place. So Merck, I guess a lot of people will have heard of Merck, but do you want to just give us a little bit of an insight as to what Merck does? I know it's a very diverse organisation, how big it is, and you mentioned a little bit about the operation in Cork. Just share with us what you can. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep as brief as I can because there's many elements to the company, as you mentioned. So, Merck is a leading science and technology company, and we operate across healthcare, life science, and performance materials. So, the part of the business I work with is in life science. So, we like to say in life science that we solve the toughest problems in the industry by collaborating with the global scientific community.
Mm,
And our promise is to accelerate access to health for people everywhere. And what we do is we solve problems at every stage of the process, from discovery and development to processing, manufacturing, and diagnostics. And we help customers deliver the promise of their work better, faster, and safer. We have the expertise to understand the challenges of our customers. So essentially, we'd be a key supplier for a lot of the pharmaceutical companies globally. We'd have partnerships and collaborations with most of, if not every, pharmaceutical company globally.
fantastic. And how many employees have you got at Merck? I mean, both in Cork and also globally.
So at a global level, across all three businesses, there's 56,000 employees. And
Wow.
from a life science point of view, globally, we have 22,000. And for example, at a Cork site, we'd be about 800 people at the moment.
Okay, huge, really huge global business. So yeah, fantastic. So we met on LinkedIn, and we were chatting about some of the things you'd been working on, and I think one of the things that was really interesting for me, in an area I've wanted to cover for a while, is this idea of how do we communicate with offline workers, and by that we mean people who are off the grid in terms of emails and having company devices and phones and that sort of thing. So they're kind of difficult to get to in terms of if we have platforms like Yammer and Workplace and Microsoft Teams. So and I guess these are the people who we would typically rely on our more traditional channels with. So and I know we're talking more generally around your entire career, not just your experience at Merck. So I'd be really interested to know from your experience, because I know the companies you've worked for, that's been a kind of recurring theme. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered when it comes to communicating with offline workers? And then we'll maybe go on to later on in the interview talk about how you've kind of dealt with some of those. But what are some of the challenges that brings, Owen?
Yeah, sure. You've kind of mentioned it. Typically it is the fact that these are non-desk employees. So, like, unlike me and you, they're not sitting in front of a laptop all day. So,
Mm,
getting the messages and getting the right messages to them is more of a challenge because, a lot of companies globally will rely on newsletters, intranets, and social enterprise tools to communicate with their employees. Whereas if you have a non-desk population, and it can vary from sector to sector. So, for example, when I worked with Tesco, fast moving consumer goods, you'd have frontline employees who are working, stacking shelves and the supermarket tills. So I suppose it's a little bit easier to use maybe a social enterprise tool like Yammer with them because, basically they can have their phone with them and they can
yeah.
download the various app. Whereas from a manufacturing side of things, you're not even allowed to bring a mobile phone or any kind of personal devices into clean room areas or, where you're conducting, um, you know, conducting experiments or
Yes.
processing highly flammable goods. So that presents a challenge in itself. But I think firstly it's about identifying who your employees are and the profile of them and how best to get that message to them. And every sector is different. And even within a business, say for example, the Cork site, we have 800 employees. About 70% of those would be non-desk. Even within that, there's different profiles of people. You have people in labs, for example,
Mm.
who are testing all day, and then people, as I say, who are working on the manufacturing floor, who typically would work 12-hour shifts. And have deadlines to meet and high customer orders. So
Yeah.
working in a very highly pressurized environment. So you do have to think long and hard about how you get that message to them, because I suppose their everyday work is dictated by meeting those targets, and supplying our customers, key customers globally. So that has to
Yeah.
be taken into consideration also.
I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? When you're thinking about what determines, how do you distinguish an offline worker? I think you've raised some really good points there. So one is, just the work itself is incompatible with, as like you say, if you're sat at a desk all day and it's an administrative role, then that's you are kind of using the medium that we are trying to communicate with you through. But if you're working a machine or a production line, or you're driving a forklift truck or whatever it is, it's totally incompatible for you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one element. The other is, and I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely spot on, because I've worked in food industry myself, and when anything with glass or anything that's got a shatterable screen would be, is barred. You're not allowed to take it into the. And then obviously you gave some other reasons there, explosive risk, that sort of thing. So that's the sort of environment. And then I guess the other thing is we've kind of alluded to, or maybe not talked about directly, is sometimes there's a demographic challenge, isn't there, where
Mm.
and again, I don't want to kind of put people into stereotypes, but sometimes there are environments where people are just less tech savvy. It's just either age or just sort of social conditions that mean that actually that's not a kind of a medium that they would naturally be comfortable with, whereas maybe other people would be. So I think it's quite interesting to sort of distinguish what is it that creates that situation where we've got someone who we would class as offline or off the grid, as it were. Were there any other sort of things that might make someone offline worker? Because I think it's useful to sort of think, who are my offline workers if I'm in a different sort of industry as well, perhaps.
Yeah, what I've always would have said is, we need to speak to them on their terms. So it's
Yeah.
understanding how they, I suppose, consume their information.
Mm.
As you mentioned, a lot of people, it's through their phones, it's through apps, etc. But there might be constraints in terms of, when people can sit down and go through their phone. So for
Mm.
example, if someone is in a manufacturing, at a machine and whatever, they take their break time, catching up on the news of the day rather than the company news. So
Yeah.
are there other ways you can get that message across? And one thing I've been an advocate of is, I call it back to the future. So it's using the tried and tested methods of communication through your notice boards, and through simple things like having snap frames in the toilets over
Mm.
hand dryers at the back of toilet doors. They would have traditionally been used down through the years and may have been phased out, but they're still an effective way of getting that message across. Now, obviously, you have to be succinct and you have to be, you can't go into too much detail, but getting high level messaging across, I still think that is effective. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the second part is empowering your line manager and your supervisors to cascade messaging to get those key strategic messages or company updates across, because everybody nowadays is flooded with information, and you have to be tactical and strategic also in terms of what information you want to filter down to your employees,
Yeah.
because what you don't want to do is overload them every day with strategic messaging. So you have to be precise of what you're doing, and you have to be brief. That would be the main thing from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's just rewind, because I think that's good kind of heads up of what we're maybe good to kind of
Yeah.
cover off in the rest. So I think the first thing is, I mean my kind of in-house corporate days go back quite a while now, but it's a long time since I've been in that environment. But I mean, these are kind of pre-smartphone, pre-social media days. But I guess working in a food factory, I kind of saw the best and the worst of what you'd call probably the Back to the Future type media. So I remember, excuse me, audits of notice boards that We did that. We'd spent a fortune actually putting notice boards all over the factory in kind of places that we thought, well, people couldn't possibly ignore that. It's on the corridor where they walk from the factory to the food area. That's the prime real estate for putting the notice boards up. And I remember doing an audit there where we kind of stood there and watched, and I think 3 people in an hour stopped to look at the notice boards, and then the sort of penny dropped for us, which is, hang on, if you're going from the factory to the canteen, you want to go to the canteen and get your food, and on your way back, you're probably going to leave it as late as possible so you can clock on at the last possible minute. So you want to make the most of your break time. You're not going to use your break time to stop in the corridor and look at a notice board. So it's like, duh. But I mean, but I guess. So things like that and plasma screens, and you talked about a few things there that I've always kind of wondered whether is it just me, or is it actually the back of toilet doors and above hair dryer, hand dryers, and on the canteen table, the little kind of menu holders that we used to use that are always the ones that we knew people would read it, because they would always say, yeah, that's where I kind of find out what you want to hear, you want to tell us. So what you mentioned there, some of the Back to the Future stuff. I mean, is it like that, or have you found any more kind of, media, any other forms of media that are kind of better suited or maybe more modern than those things I just rattled off there?
No, you raise a fair point, because you need to capture people and capture people's attention. Where they're, I suppose, at a break time, or especially in manufacturing operations. So that is, at the hand dryer, that is at the canteen table with the menu holders. So I think that's one element of it. It can't be the only element. You have to supplement it with different channels. So, for example, we don't know what each individual employee uses I suppose, to consume information. So if they want to read it at the canteen, let's have an option for them there. If they prefer using the plasma screens, or if they get information from that, let's have an option there. If they prefer to use the social enterprise tool like a Yammer or like the company app or the intranet, let's have information there. So I think it's using all the different channels and making sure that no matter what channel they use it, we have up-to-date information. They're getting, as I always say, the right information to the right person at the right time. So there's no one solution, I suppose.
Yeah.
Knowing your business, it's knowing your industry, and it's, the old adage that you'd have is know your audience, and how are they getting their information, and it's building your plans around that then. But I wouldn't just solely concentrate on a digital side of things. I would try and have a balance there, especially if you have a non-desk population, between your traditional forms of communication through your newsletters, your physical newsletters, if that's the case, your canteens, and your notice boards, versus the intranet versus the email, online newsletter, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I know the other thing, another element of that, which you've kind of alluded to there, is also how compelling is it? I remember and I'm interested to know, from your experience, whether we had a very traditional, almost like a newspaper. We had a journalist who would come along, and she would take stories from around the site, and she would put that together, and then this really nice newspaper would come, but it was always kind of 2 or 3 months old news, and it was very difficult to get it to be contemporary. But also there was always a challenge around that isn't the sort of stuff they would want to read. It's just not interesting. It's not something they're going to go out of their way to kind of read. And again, if they're limited for time, and we always used to find, that mixing sort of, what I don't want to call it factory gossip, but, information about people and individuals and their personal stuff with corporate stuff was a good way of doing it, because it kind of, it rather than it was just a wall of corporate information, which people just tended to either at best skim and probably at worst just flip past and not even look at. I mean, from a content perspective and tone, have you found that's important as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use an example of when I was with Tesco, and that we had a physical newsletter that we created once a month. And make a key point, it was blending the corporate information, corporate updates with those human interest stories. So, for example, highlighting colleagues who are doing charity work. So, he had one big charity partner with Tesco, for example. So, all our fundraising throughout the year would be geared towards that. So, and each supermarket and each region had responsibility for how they would fundraise. So, come up with new ideas, novel ideas. So that always got great feedback. We always got a huge amount of people wanting to submit pictures and updates and stories about how they were fundraising. And also I always call them the big winners, like weddings, birthdays, babies, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to give people a reason to open the newsletter. So for those updates which aren't as time sensitive, maybe as well. So
Yeah.
let's see what the other site was doing in terms of their fundraising. Oh, for Pancake Tuesday, for example,
Yeah.
and that they raised X amount of money for charity. So, and it gives colleagues ideas in terms of how they can fundraise and how they can get their community behind them.
Yeah.
And then you blend that in then with, your corporate updates or, performance, financials, that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
as I said, the key point is give people a reason to open it. And it may seem basic, but people do want to open and read about what other colleagues are doing, or
Yeah.
colleagues who've had weddings or major milestones. So
True. It's
as
true.
I said, that
As-
traditional form of communication was really successful. And some people might come in and try to say we need to go digital, but those traditional forms have really worked. And simple things like placing them in the canteens and people can flick through it during their lunch break,
yeah.
and that gets conversations going at the cooler or whatever, and helps with engagement as well. So again, I would never discount using your traditional forms. And
No.
again, just knowing who your audience is and knowing who your employees are.
Definitely. I remember my first boss when I first managed people for the first time. I'd done my team brief training. I'd been on the 1 day course on how to give a great team brief, and I remember him saying to me, he said, "No matter what they've told you on that course, just remember the core is bore, be vocal with the local." And it's true, And I thought that was quite a nice way of
Yeah.
remembering, how to get the messages across and intertwining them. So. I mean, just from my perspective,
Mhm.
I guess what we're talking about here are a combination of like kind of corporate sort of, strategic messages or kind of short term messages. I mean, from your experience, and I always remember this was you know, as someone who at the time I was working in learning and development and comms and the we had a really good relationship. It was a very close. We worked very closely with the operations guys. It wasn't that we were seen as the sort of the support team who kind of don't have a proper job, and we're the guys who we make everything. It was we were very integrated, but I always remember the kind of age-old discussions about when is it appropriate to take people off the line? When is it appropriate to turn
Yeah.
the machines off and actually put them somewhere? And I mean, what are your experiences of those sort of, I'm calling it, take them off the line type situations where
Mhm.
you do need to actually get them to kind of concentrate and focus on something without trying to just shoehorn it into their working day? I mean, what have you found works there?
I think, first of all, you can't be doing it every week,
Yeah.
because, depending on the industry, shutting down machines can cost you, up to a couple of hours of productivity. So, you have supervisors there, and you have, deadlines to meet. So, you have to, I suppose, get their buy-in beforehand before you're asking them to. So, for example, where we are at work, it's a quarterly town hall example where, for that 1 hour, once every quarter, we ask that employees who are on site, pre-COVID, to come to the canteen area where we
Yeah.
would have our town hall. Also, with the challenge that you have a certain amount of employees who are off-site, or working on processes that can shut down, that it was recorded, and then there was an ask of our supervisors and managers to make sure that in the intervening 7 days, or by the time everyone is back on their shift, that they again have a time allotted to sit down and keep it to an hour, so it's not going
Mm,
overboard, and to give employees a chance to sit down and to listen and to see what was posted at the town hall. Again, making sure content from the town hall is a blend between business updates, company performance, with is human interest stories, and for example, Mark, we have a lot of examples, because when we make a difference in people's lives, and we're helping
mm,
to prolong lives and save lives. So, we use examples of how the products we make at our site contribute to this, safety of people, and, the betterment of their lives. So, using examples, and we work hard at finding those examples of, what we're producing here, how it affects the end user, or the patient. So, and, the feedback we get from employees is they really like hearing those stories. So,
mm,
they're
mm,
more engaged, and they're more proud of they're working with a company that's making a difference. And sometimes that can get lost, because we work in a complicated business in diagnostics. We work in filtration devices, and chromatography media, which in itself might be hard for employees to distinguish how it makes a difference. So it's
mm,
joining those dots for them and letting them know that what you do every day is making a difference. So,
mm.
using the town hall to tell those stories, firstly, and then secondly, making sure that each employee has time allotted that they can sit down and they can watch the town hall. So it's not a
Yeah.
huge ask, once a quarter, 4 hours for a year,
Yeah.
from where we all get together as a business to to share these stories and to share updates. And I think that helps with the buy-in then from your managers and from your team leads, etc. So
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be the example I have where I am at the moment, and it is quite a
Yeah.
quite successful model.
Yeah, it's. I think for people who've not worked in those sorts of environments, it's like it's incredibly challenging how compressed that time is, isn't it? And how valuable
Yeah.
it is, and how you don't want to squander it because it's so precious. And when you do, you're absolutely right. The turning off a line that it needs to be. It takes time to start it up again. It takes time,
Mhm.
while it's not working, and even if you bring in temporary labor, that's not a costless exercise, from terms of it's got to be carefully managed. So yeah, it is a real challenge, and it takes me back to when we used to have to do that. So I completely see where you're coming from. You just mentioned there, I think the bit that I really wanted to sort of, just sort of finally finish off with you on this, which was when we had I had an interview back in episode 22 of last series, an interview with Chris Coburn, and he was working at XC, and he was talking about this idea and very much around his philosophy, which I completely agree with, which is pivotal to all of this. Outside of the kind of the town halls and the kind of data is the
Mhm.
line manager. The line manager is absolutely vital as a conduit through which we can kind of cascade. Whether it's through huddles or just being out on the line and walking the floor, or I'm talking metaphorically about the line. It equally applies to all of these different environments we talked about at the beginning. I mean, what are some of your thoughts and experiences of do you agree that is a pivotal role, but also what are some of the challenges that brings when we're relying on people who may be very technically good but not naturally
Mhm.
good communicators, and also may not see it as a priority as well? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Owen?
Yeah, I agree completely. Your line managers and your supervisors are pivotal. And you see with a lot of organizations, you speak about the frozen middle. So high level strategic messaging that's sent from a global level or regional level, that sometimes there's an expectation that will go down through the various lines of reporting lines down to the guys on the shop floor and the factory floor. But a lot of times, it's your supervisors, managers, maybe where those blockages occur. And sometimes there's an assumption that you mentioned it, scientists and engineers, I suppose wire differently to us communicators, that you can't always assume that they're equipped with the tools to be able to cascade messaging. Communication doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So I
Mm,
think once they assume role as a team leader or as a manager, that it's important that you provide training or an opportunity for them to upskill in that area, because that role is vital. Is this it's and it plays a top up and a top down and bottom up role also, because those supervisors and managers are cascading messaging, but they're picking up what the reaction is to whatever the update is, and they can feed that back up too. So
yeah,
I think they're a vital resource in getting that information in a simplified manner to the employees, but also getting that vital feedback about how a program or an update, how it's hitting with employees, because without that you can sit in your office and assume that everyone understands what your new strategy is or whatever, but are
mm,
they really? And that's where your line managers and your supervisors come into their own. But I think it's backing them and equipping them with the tools they need to be able to perform that task. And as I said, you can't always assume that they're natural at it. So it's about investing some time in upskilling them in that area. And from my experience is that they're all a lot of it, managers and supervisors are really eager to upskill and to learn more in that area.
mm,
It helps them in
yeah,
their daily roles also, not just cascading company strategic priorities, but also getting messages across to employees. And it kind of feeds into the health or the HR side of it. Giving feedback, taking feedback, being being able to give constructive criticism.
mm,
That all kind of feeds into being a better communicator. So,
definitely.
um, as you said, really vital role they play in any business.
Yeah, yeah, I think building on what you just said there, I think having value in. I think it starts from bringing them in or how you promote them. So a lot of the people in my experience tend to be promoted through, maybe they were great machine operators or they
Yeah,
were great, kind of sales assistant or whatever, and they get promoted into a role where they're managing other people who do that job. And I think it's a case of, are we promoting them purely because they were really good at that, or because we've spotted that they've got that kind of innate communications capability, and then once they're in the role, it's about not just about training them and giving them the skills, but it's about the conversations they have with their own line manager, which
yeah,
talks about not just you need to be great at executing the day job stuff, but you need to be able to good at developing and talking to your people and your team, that bedside manner, and
mm,
kind of the empathy, because I think it is a really tricky tightrope that the organizations tend to walk in that area.
yeah.
And
And I think you need to understand as well that they have a day job and they have those targets to meet. So it's an
yeah,
awareness, understanding that that is their primary focus. But can we help them? Can we supplement their skills by giving them this training to be able to cascade messaging? And
yeah,
as you said, it helps them in their overall work environment as well. Be it the relationship with their manager or with the people that report to them. But also, I think you need to be aware that they have a day job, they have targets, they're under pressure. But cognizant of that, here is ways we feel we can help you to be a better manager.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's actually making that implicit connection clear between, actually, if they're better communicators and they're communicating better with their team, they're probably going to be less prone to quality problems, safety issues, productivity issues. It's a kind of yin and yang. It's not like one or the other. It's actually complementary. And I think that sometimes is we haven't got time for all this people stuff. We need to
Yeah,
get stuff
yeah,
out of the door. Well, actually, you'll probably get more stuff out of the door if you did more of the people stuff more consistently. So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I think businesses in general are putting a lot more focus on learning and development side of things,
yeah,
and
yeah.
helping all employees to upskill in any areas they if they feel they need. So whether it's simple, LinkedIn Learning, for example, would be a huge kind of app
Mm,
we use in Merck in helping employees identify areas they'd like to upskill in. And again, how do you facilitate that as a manager? And how do you encourage employees? So maybe you see promise in someone who is displaying leadership skills. Is there any kind of courses we would suggest to them? And that's all part of the communications process. Being a better communicator is
sure.
understanding your employees and what makes them tick, and then helps with engagement. Then if you can suggest to them that here are some options you might like to explore.
Yeah,
So again, it's a holistic view of how you empower managers and your supervisors, to get to know their employees, and displaying that emotional intelligence. That helps with productivity, that helps with engagement, that helps with connection. So, in a lot of ways, it's a win-win situation, both
yeah,
for the
yeah,
employees, their supervisors, and for the business.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's been brilliant. I mean, just to sum up, then I think what we've talked about is, first of all, is what are our offline workers, and I think we talked about the different criteria. Then, and I don't think anybody's going to be listening to this and going, "Oh, you know what? I never realised those people were offline." But I think sometimes I think again, it's easy to fall into the trap that everybody likes to be communicated to in the same ways, and there are people who are just naturally more, just not, just immune to some of those typical kind of conduits, and then that led into what we talked about, which is, valuing some of those channels that we may kind of see as kind of old school, but it actually, in that type of environment or in that type of situation, I've had this conversation before with previous interviewees where, they'd come to that same conclusion. We had someone, I forget exactly which episode it is. I'll put the link in the show notes, and her company made building products, and they kind of, had like kind of building warehouses where people, you drive your van in and you pick up your flagstones, and obviously again, that's a kind of group that would be quite difficult to communicate with normally, because of the type of the work, and because, just demographically, they're just not used to using kind of technology. So again, that we came to that same conclusion that, some of the old school techniques are actually relevant there. And I think the final point there, which is about the line managers, which is, in those sorts of situations, you've got to invest in, and in any situation, but particularly in these situations, you need to invest in your line managers' capability as a communicator. Anything else that you want to add to the equation, Owen, before we wrap up? Because that's been quite a really nice sort of structured
Yeah.
conversation, I think.
And I think sometimes, there might be an assumption that all employees get access to a desktop on a daily basis, which is not the
Mm,
case. I know,
mm,
for example, there might be one desktop or one laptop among a team of 20 or 30. So, at max, they might get access to it for 10 minutes a day. So, how can you use those 10 minutes to get the right message across? So, it's knowing the audience, as I said earlier, knowing the employees and
Mm.
knowing what access they have and how they like to consume information.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Well, Owen, just to finish off the interview, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all my interviewees, and I know you're prepared for this, and you've kind of got a kind of publicly shareable version of this story. I'm intrigued to know, try and work out what the non-publicly shareable example might be. But no, but it'd be wonderful if you could just share a little story with us about even people who work with you professionally, or friends or family or professional acquaintances, never knew about you or don't know about you. It could be something you do now or something you've done in the past that you're willing to share with us, Owen.
Yeah, well, in my younger, teenage and college days, I was quite a soap fan. So I've actually appeared as an extra on two soaps. One is Home and Away,
Ah,
Australian TV shows, which people in the UK and Ireland would be familiar with. So I spent a year in Australia, and I travelled out to where they film Home and Away in Palm Beach in Australia. I hung around for so long, they just decided to give me a part as an extra because I think they felt sorry for me. But they used to be amazed with the hordes of Irish and English people landing down to Palm Beach in Sydney on a daily basis to get a glimpse of the superstar. So that's my
okay.
first.
And what was your other role that you had?
It's an Irish soap called Fair City, and again,
Right.
I was in university in Dublin, and a friend of mine, did voiceovers, and she had said that they needed a couple of extras, so I think got a €60, €80 at the time for standing in the pub, of course, and walking past one of the actors. So, yeah, so those are my two claims to fame. I've appeared on two soaps, so
Fantastic. My
it's
my
something I
my
take a bit of pride in.
Yeah, my sister-in-law actually. Ironically, my sister-in-law last weekend was an extra in Peaky Blinders, where they were
Wow.
filling it up in Scotland, where she is. So I'm going back to yours. I'm intrigued. So, did you come up on the kind of credits at the end,
No,
or was it?
no,
No, no,
you
no, no.
unfortunately
It
don't get
was
that. You're just thrown in as I was walking past two people on the beach in Home and Away,
right.
and said,
Okay. I
"What?"
was going to say, like sort of pale bloke in beachwear, Owen Weldon comes up at the end on the credits. So, but I guess if you've been there a while, you probably got a decent tan,
Yeah,
right?
I'd solid skin at that stage, so
Yeah.
it blended in with the locals.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. That's great. I think it's definitely a first for the show. I had someone who'd been on. Had been actually a candidate on The Apprentice. So there's
Oh,
always, and
oh,
I've been on The Weakest Link. So I'm always kind of keen on this kind of semi
oh,
showbiz connections. Not
yeah.
really, but yeah, yeah. Well, look, that's absolutely brilliant, Owen. I really appreciate the time and the conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link into your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, if that's all right. If anybody wants to kind of
Yeah,
reach out to you and maybe kind of talk to you about your experiences in this area, or or
absolutely.
just connect with you. Anything else that you want to share with us on that I can stick into the show notes, or is LinkedIn okay? Are you a serial rabid tweeter, or are you? Is any other
You can
mediums that
find
we
me
can?
on Twitter at Owen Weldon.
Okay,
No underscore, no overscore, no capitals at that. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
okay, okay. And Owen is spelled Eoin. If anyone's
That's
looking
it.
for
Yeah.
you, yeah, yeah, fantastic. Well, look, that's been brilliant, Owen. Thank you very much. Wonderful to catch up with you, and I'm sure we'll be talking offline at some point as well as again. It's really, really, really interesting. I think we share a lot of similar values and principles about this area, because it is something that I think organisations who do have these offline people really need to be thinking about. But I wish you all the best, and stay safe and well, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Craig. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Take care.
See ya.
Ideally, everyone in your organization would be on the same page. They'd be facing in the same direction and towards its vision and goals. However, in today's fast moving world, as we all know, it can be really hard to get employees to see the big picture. For example, what are we aiming for? How are we going to get there? And how does my role contribute? When your employees don't see the big picture, they can make the wrong decisions. They may feel less of a sense of belonging, and they may not fully contribute towards the organization's objectives. So, how do you consistently put large numbers of people in the picture in a way that helps them understand what your organization is trying to achieve, but also do that in an engaging and effective way? At the Big Picture People, we combine visualization, discussion, and interaction to fully engage your employees in the organization's big picture. We create light bulb moments for your employees, and we bring your values, your strategies, your objectives, and your change processes to life in a really rich, clear, and visual way. We also show your employees the complexity of the world that you're operating in and how their role contributes towards organizational priorities. So if you see the value of putting your people in the picture, head across to thebigpicturepeople.co.uk and book a free 30-minute consultation call via the link on our homepage. So thank you for listening to Engaging Internal Comms. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the show and any questions, ideas, or feedback that you'd have. Anything you'd like us to cover on future episodes too, please. So you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us via the contact form at engagingic.com. You can also sign up to our mailing list there, and we'll send you relevant news about the show and anything that we think you might be interested in when it comes to internal communications and employee engagement. If you like the show and you haven't already done so, please subscribe to it directly via your podcast service. And you can also subscribe via the links on our podcast page, which again is engagingic.com. If you like the show, we'd be really grateful if you could leave us a review, and also if you could leave some verbal feedback there as well, not just stars. That's always nice to know that we've been appreciated, and particularly how we've helped you. If you know anyone else who might like the show or might benefit from it, please tell them, please share it with them. Please share the link to our website, engagingic.com. And that will be great, because we want to grow our community. We want to get as many people involved in the show as possible. And the bigger, the better. Okay, thank you.